Good afternoon. It is the final Friday of the month. It's 3 p.m. in the UK, which of course means it's time for PMI Live. My name is Rich Seddon and I'm Group CEO at PMI, and I'll be facilitating the session today. My colleague Sean Buckland, who's also with me, is in the presenter's seat. It's great to see so much of our client base across all of the industries and sectors that we work with today, and so many new joiners as well. I had a look, Sean, earlier on at the registration list, and deep breath here. Here's the industries we've got represented in the audience today. Big challenge for you. However, here we go. We've got chemicals, law, consulting, logistics, warehousing, retail, central government, local government, policymakers, executive agencies, technical and business services, banking, finance, insurance, defence contractors, automotive suppliers, manufacturers, both small and large, personal services, consumer products, entertainment, charities, further and higher education, and healthcare. Now, who have I missed? Do let me know, and we will attempt to make this applicable to all, which is easy to do because we're going back to core principles today, and Sean has a fantastic episode. Each day that we run these sessions, we do a dry run in the morning, and this morning is no exception. We went through the content and we run through our discussions and check and see what kind of points may come up. And it never ceases to amaze me. This is my 117th of these things, and it never ceases to amaze me the abilities of our team to address old challenges in new and imaginative ways. And that's exactly what Sean has done today in this live session. So please do help us navigate the discussion by contributing your questions, queries, observations and thoughts to the discussions. You will see somewhere up there the chat and Q&A buttons. Please do use them and help us to kind of structure this discussion around your needs, thoughts and positions. If you are joining us on one of the live streams on YouTube, Facebook or LinkedIn, you're very welcome. If you would like to take part in these discussions or the poll we've got this afternoon, hop on over to pmi.co.uk/webinars, where you can still register and join us right here, right now. As well as streaming live, we have also activated the live captions and translation services for you, he says, pressing on very quickly. So if you would like to read or hear the discussion in another language, simply go up to the menu above there, and you've got more, and you go to languages and speech, and you should be able to select a language of your choosing. In the intro, you may have noticed our new AI courses displaying at the start of the session. We've launched this new suite of programs simply because we see the future of AI in the workplace sitting firmly and squarely in the hands of the improvement practitioner. Not with IT, not with strategy, not with anywhere else it may have emerged from. It's with you guys. Fundamental good process design is essential to effective deployment and utilization of AI. And what are we trying to achieve here above anything else? Improve productivity and service from our processes. And we see that sitting with you and you alone in the driver's seat. So we've got a whole program, a suite of 3 courses, which launched back in September. We've just finished our cohort. In fact, in the next 5 minutes or so, they will have finished the second cohort of our open courses for those programs. And then next week, we launch with our first FTSE 100 customer, an in-house program. We have got another open program in November, which is available. My glamorous colleague Neil will put the link to that in the chat very shortly. So you can see those courses, take a look. They are running in November, as I say, and we do have some places remaining. So if you want to be at the forefront of what I think is probably, is it the 4th or the 5th industrial revolution, Sean, one or the other, get yourself registered on one of those programs. As you may have gathered, we love to talk. So if you would like to chat through any of the topics we covered today, any of the topics that are covered in those AI courses or anything else, please do give us a shout. You'll find all the contact details on the website. So episode 117, Sean, why this topic, why now, and also would you like to tell us who you are, introduce yourself to the new audience, and what you've been working on recently?
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Rich. Very excited to be back in the hot seat again.
Been a
It
while.
has been a while, as you say. So I'm Sean Buckland, a director consultant with PMI. My background specialism is in applying Lean Six Sigma into service processes and management system processes. And it's there that I've been spending most of my time over the recent years. And it's quite a fascinating thing. Taguchi talked about where is the waste in the system, and he talked about 30% of the waste being stuck in the management system itself. And it's not wrong. And with more and more information, more and more details, data, etc., kicking around, it's getting harder and harder, I think, for managers to truly focus. And so management processes are very much my thing at the moment. And they are absolutely critical for effective deployment of logistics, manufacturing, sales process, you name it. It affects every single process that matters. So why this, why now? Well, because I think with everything going faster and faster and faster, we're at risk of making the same mistakes quicker and quicker and quicker. And every mistake we make is driving in waste, which means we could see exponential growth of waste at this time. And we really need to make sure that we're using the tools, the power, AI, data mining, all these clever things that are out there, the power of the new big data environments. We're making sure that we're making the best use of those. And maybe that means we need to spend a little bit more time winning and a little bit less time trying to be quick. And that's what I wanted to cover with us today.
Sounds fantastic. Okay, so let's have a look at these topics then and see what you're going to take us through.
Fantastic. So I've got three main topic areas. The first thing is about selecting quick wins with care. And the logic behind this is very straightforward. It's what I've just said already. We don't want to be picking on the wrong things and just doing the wrong things more quickly. We also need to make sure that even if it's doing the right thing, something's going to eliminate waste and improve service, we want to make sure that that's working in line with where we're trying to get to as an organization, for ourselves, for our customers, increasing value. And therefore the importance of connecting the win with the aim and the drivers within the system as a system. And of course, thirdly, some practical pieces. Now, I'd like to caveat this right at the beginning, Rich, with two key caveats. The first thing is, thank you. I'm talking here today, and usually when I'm doing the webinars, I normally try and keep things really low practical, whereas this one I'm going quite big picture and whole system. So it's quite possible that I could even just cover within one sentence or one brief topic, something that might in itself be an entire webinar. And I just ask the audience's forgiveness of that. It's not that I'm being impractical or theoretical, it's that I need this to be applicable to all situations because I think it's so key. And the second thing is, what might be perceived throughout this presentation is in some ways what might be seen as a criticism of managers, and it's absolutely not that. I have the deepest respect for anybody who's prepared to put themselves in the hot seat and take on the responsibilities that management, modern day management, requires. But what this is not a criticism of the managers. They're good people doing a good job. What it is a criticism of some of the management processes that maybe we've fallen into some bad habits with. And I've seen them, unfortunately, in every sector that I've worked in. I've worked a lot in government, I've worked in manufacture, I've worked in service industries, and unfortunately I see the same pitfalls being fallen into time and time again. So please, if anybody thinks I'm being critical, what I'm being critical is of the process, not the person applying the process.
And as they say, awareness is the first step in recovery, isn't it?
Indeed. And just to kick that whole thing off then, what I'd like to do is just start with a reference, as if you like, the definition of terms. Quick wins is a very simple phrase, and we often use it. Many of us are using it even on a daily basis. And it's made up of two key words, quick and win. And I just want to have a think about that for a moment. What do we mean by quick? And what do we mean by win? And what I'd like for the whole of this presentation to be centered on is the idea that win means more of the benefit and less of the harm. So we're delivering more value with less resource or equivalent. And quick means from the point at which you've identified it as a priority to work on, at whatever level, from frontline to strategic, to the point where you have a lasting, sustainable solution that's accepted and adopted. Not the point where we get running around trying things out. The point about the quick is that how long it takes, what's the lead time from prioritization through to sustainable embedded benefit. That's my definition of quick.
So describe that again, Sean, just quickly recap.
Yep. So the win is we have actually genuinely increased value. So more of the harm. Sorry.
More of the benefit,
more of the
less
benefit,
of the harm.
less of the harm.
Yeah.
And quick is the lead time from identification of the problem as a priority to resolve at any level in the organization through to the point where we have a lasting embedded benefit.
Aha. Okay.
Yep. That's the key lead time measure that I'm using to define quick. Okay.
Perfect.
So
Thank you.
Let's go. We're going to start off, as we quite often do, with a poll, and you can see I'm building on this concept of what's the definition of quick win. And the list that's here, and by the way, I will say the poll will be opened up by Neil in a few moments, so please don't send your answers into the Q&A and flood it. It'd be fantastic. Just wait a few seconds for me to introduce the poll, and then Neil will launch it. But I want you to think about not what's your personal definition of quick win. I'd like you to talk about what's the definition that you think is most widely used in the organization, the teams around you, in practice. Yeah, and I want you to select just one, even if you've seen many of them. So we have answer number one. We'll hit the numbers fast. This is about just get some results. Yeah, I want to see results. Answer number two is I want to change the KPI. I want to see a change in a number that matters to me. I don't care how you do it, just get that thing done. And it might be, for example, like hit a sales target by the end of the month or something like that. Answer number three is about acting fast on a recent problem. We can't have that ever happen again, sort it out, something like that. Number four, interesting one, the word win isn't in there, but the definition of the win is test if we have actually genuinely managed to change something, and then making sure that we have, then scale it out fast across the organization. And number five, the definition of the win is we've actually got a measurable improvement in the system overall, even if it's measurable on a relatively small or complex way. But the key thing is we have definitely done something to improve the way the organization delivers value. So let's have an open up, if you don't mind, Neil, if you haven't already. Let's see what people think of is the most common, usually used definition in their organization. And just while you're looking at those, just be aware that they're not mutually exclusive. Yeah, but which one do you think is the most common sentiment? That's what I'm driving at here.
Yeah. So as Sean said, we recognise more than one of these may be used at different times. But in your experience, which is the most frequently used definition out of this choice that we've given you here? There may be others, of course, and if there are, do let us know. We're just trying to get a feel for what people's perception of quick wins are and is, and how much that differs from that definition. I put your definition, Sean, of the two terms into the chat for people to refer to as well. Okay, so we're not even going to need very much more time on this. We can see what has come streaking out in front, which is act fast on recent problems. Is that what you're expecting, Sean?
Unfortunately, it is. And even if we add the next two, I'm going to break these answers 1, 2, and 3. Please have a look at them. Notice the emphasis in 1, 2, and 3 is on the fast, the quick. Whereas the emphasis in 4 and 5 is on the win. And therefore, what we're seeing is an 89% to 9%. Oh, sorry, it's just tripped. At 90-10 bias in favor of do it quickly, regardless.
Yep.
Now, it doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing that was done. But we'll come on to that in more detail. But what it does mean is the emphasis is on the speed. And that's what I was saying earlier about my experiences as we get more and more powerful tools available to us, greater and greater access to working globally simultaneously. It's a really interesting challenge, because if we do the wrong things faster, it just means we generate problems faster. And that's what I want to try and help set aside.
Great. Okay, so if that's the context, then what are we going to do about this, Sean? Take us through.
Okay, so let's start with a very key first thing, and that is selecting the quick win with care. And I put a little subtitle to this section, which is possibly, arguably, the most important thing I'm going to say all webinar. And that is this: if you don't know that what you're going to do is going to have a positive result on the system, the safest thing to assume is it will have a negative impact on the system. Therefore, your best choice is actually do nothing. With the small
Eek.
caveat,
Okay.
as if, yes, go on, Rich.
No, I was going to say eek. Okay.
Yeah, do nothing is better than do something. Don't just do something, stand there. Yeah, but stand there in the way that Taiichi Ono would have us stand there, in a circle, observing the system and reflecting and understanding how the system is working as a system. There's a small caveat there, and that is if lives are at risk, if there's a genuine health and safety crisis on our hands, then of course the important thing is to act with speed. But if any other situation, why would you choose any option that might make things worse? Doesn't make a logical sense. But I understand the pressures managers are under. They are phenomenal pressures. It could be driven from shareholders, it could be driven from competition, it could be driven from a global change that happened overnight because of the crazy political times we're living in. All of these things are putting people under immense pressure. So our natural instinct is fight or flight. And what I'm asking people to do is train themselves. Their natural instinct is to calm and observe and understand, seek to understand. So don't just do something, stand there. Okay, so why is this so important? What is it that goes wrong with that typical, those top three, that 90%? What is it that typically, not always, but typically goes wrong with them? Well, the first thing is because the person who's been given the charge and said, right, go sort that, usually only has a very limited amount of control, if any control at all, over the wider system. So they do the best they can because they're good people. So they work within what they've got control over, and they sub-optimize because they only create a local solution. And that sub-optimization might be to, for example, put in an extra authorization step or turn off a bit of IT that was causing some problem elsewhere, and that's, you know, and so on. There are all these different things that people might do, having no understanding of the downstream consequence of it. That, for example, an invoice couldn't actually be raised or some such problem. Or, you know, there's all these kind of things. We could all list 1,000 different examples, and by all means, please just throw them into the chat, your examples, just so that people don't feel alone in this. But the next thing that happens is that managers are often in a situation where there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of panic. So the natural reaction is to overreact. And if any of you have played the MIT beer game that goes back decades now, you'll know exactly what that looks like in terms of the way the system becomes more and more unstable in the supply chain as the knock-on effects travel up and down the logistic chain. So overreacting actually makes the noise higher, which of course then generates more problems and less ability to concentrate. And another one that's increasingly common because of the availability of data is for people to see numbers that are not necessarily true, not necessarily up to date, not necessarily understood, and using those numbers to try and drive results. The tail literally wagging the dog. And I'm seeing this happening more and more and more. It was an issue 30 years ago, but right now it's an outright pandemic. And it's very scary to see. And what that, of course, is doing is that people get no stability. It's just constant noise and change and rush around. And then finally, it's our own natural humanity that goes wrong. If I'm in a position of authority and I'm asking somebody to go and fix something, what I'm likely to do with today's prevailing management culture is tell them what I want them to fix. And that's even considered good leadership, good direction, good setting.
Yeah.
But what happens is I may not have properly understood the problem. I may not have properly understood the root cause. So what my suggestion or my direct order even might be is to go and do the wrong thing. But because I have the belief that I've come up with the right idea, because why would I tell my team to go and do something I didn't think was right, then it's natural for me to believe, I have this confirmation bias that my idea is the best idea. What I see is all there is. Another bias that I could add to this list here. And because of my optimism bias, of course, I believe it's going to have the desired result. So if any unintended consequences happen, separated in time and space, who am I likely to blame? Myself? Probably not. Probably my team for not having done what I asked of them, or somebody else for being resistant to change, or another department for having been blocking. And therefore we create more and more organizational politics. And politics, to my mind, my definition of politics, Rich, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this one. My definition of politics is it's not a bad thing. It's just lots of good people trying to do the good thing. They just don't happen to have the same definition of good.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Yeah, I'd run with that, absolutely. And one of the things I think often helps me in these contexts is to try, it's not always easy, but to try and think about people's motivations in those circumstances as well. And by and large, they are not negative motivations and negative forces that are driving them, by and large. But it's so hard. That confirmation bias is such a natural human instinct, isn't it? We've come up with a theory. We came up with that. So of course it's right. Yeah.
Yeah. and what the problem is for us managers is it breaks our double loop learning. Because when things go as expected, we assume it was because our idea was the right one, even if randomly things went better. Which of course 50% of the time things get better, but they get worse, etc. That's just regression to the mean happening. But when they go wrong, we don't have, because that's separation time and space, we don't have the data to realize that what was wrong was we gave the wrong instruction in the first place.
Yeah.
And like I said, this is what I'm saying right at the beginning. I'm not criticizing managers. I'm criticizing the management processes we're sometimes under extreme pressure to follow. So what is the remedy for this? This is the key point. And the remedy for this is really, really hard. Simple to say, super hard to do. We need to make sure that we're acting on the system and reducing the common cause variation in the system. So the act on the system means we've got a view of the entire whole system map, and within that, all of the value streams or key work systems, whichever language you want to use, and within those, we've got proper ownership established, and those people are making sure, it doesn't matter what functions they are aligned with historically, they're saying, is the value flowing through that system? And if not, what's blocking it? And what can we do next to improve that flow? And the point about the common cause variation is, yes, of course, there is assignable cause variation that needs to be responded to. But the rest of the time, as the processes become more and more stable, as the value streams flow more and more cleanly, then we've got that basis for improvement for driving out more and more of the common cause variation, which of course reduces the noise even further and makes it even easier to spot what to be worked on. So it's against our natural instinct, but the important thing when the boat is rocking is get to the bottom of it and lie still and help be part of the ballast that brings that boat back in under a stable level trajectory.
And there's a really pertinent example just been popped into the chat, Sean.
Oh,
I don't know if you've seen it.
I know.
So current example of a wrong quick win is that we need to improve cash flow, and ops are pushed like crazy to bill the small customers for anything instead of pushing and rethinking the payment terms of key accounts which pay us in 6 months. A sublime example of exactly what Sean is talking about.
It is, and I feel sorry for everybody in this, because everybody knows in advance this isn't going to get the result, or it's unlikely to. I don't know as a fact, of course I don't, but it seems to be that there's a situation where you're not going to get the result you wanted, but you've lost the time between now and finding that out to do something better.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a shame. That is a shame. But thank you for sharing. Appreciate that. So I'm going to quote one of my favorite authors around this area, Henry Neve, and he just very simply puts it: best efforts without method equals trouble. So this is what we need to do. We need to develop the method required to calm the seas and get that smooth sailing that we want. Yeah. I know sailing in high seas is super exciting, or running around a racetrack if you're more of the automotive type person. Yeah, it's exciting, it's very noisy now, but that's not good business. Good business is boringly predictable, high profit margins, high reliability, high customer satisfaction. That's most, not all businesses, but for many, and probably most of the people on here, and certainly if you're in government, in the government businesses, we just don't need the noise. It's noisy enough out there already. Okay, so I'm going to take us back, as I always do. I don't think I've ever run a webinar without coming back to this, because for me it's just everything stems from this Deming's system of profound knowledge, because it's within this system of profound knowledge where we can understand how to appreciate a system and to work on the system. So for those of you who haven't seen it, or just need a small reminder of it, what it is, it's made up of these 4 key components: systems thinking, how do we work together as a system; psychology, how do we design it, so my way of putting it, so that I naturally choose to do the right thing, so intrinsic motivation, and that's increasingly important. The relationship with AI and how we work with AI is affecting that even more now. And variation, obviously we talked about common cause, assignable cause, and then the theory of knowledge, the way that we learn, the plan, do, study, act cycles that drives continuous improvement. These things cannot be separated. We need all 4 of them to succeed. And any win at all, it doesn't matter whether it's a micro win about changing where you've put the photocopier in the office, to a macro win about how you change your logistics footprint, where you hold your warehousing and so forth. They're all part of the same story. It's how does it fit together with the wider whole. So let's have a look through this. When we're looking at a quick win, we should evaluate its contribution to the aim of the system. This is very straightforward. If you can't draw a straight line between doing X and improving Y that is actually in line with the purpose of the organization, you're probably not choosing something that's going to be a win. Oh, well, we're going to start putting in extra steps to solve that problem from ever happening again. Well, how are extra steps contributing to the system? They're not. They're just avoiding dealing with the root cause of the original problem, and so on. This is very common in new IT rollouts, where we try and automate the waste, and so on and so forth. The next one is the management team needs to recognize that every time it acts, it should act with explicit prediction. This is a key behavior change, not to go and do what I tell you, but if we do this next, my theory is Y will happen. And then you can work with your team and treat them as the professionals and the colleagues that they are, because then they can see if you're exposing any logic flaws, because they're the ones closer to the work. So the chances are they may, if there are any. But on the other hand, if they can't spot the logic flaw, then of course it's a valid thing to go and test. That requires a certain element of humbleness and humility. It's not about being weak. It's about being clear and explicit. The win I'm looking for is X. My theory is if we do Y, then let's test that theory just between ourselves first. And then if we like it, let's go and test it in practice. You're going to get to a better result much quicker with that simple change to your management thinking. And it's all about the use of prediction. Plan, do, study, act. Of course, what the output of the plan section of Plan, do, study, act is that prediction. Once you've got that prediction, you can trigger effective double loop learning in your organization. Plan, do, study, act. We can then go and test our ideas, study the results, and then adopt, adapt, abandon our theories, depending on whether they actually worked the way we wanted to. Rich, I feel you coming in there with something you want to say.
No, I was just thinking through some of the comments that have been made and the coverage earlier on. It's amazing, specifically that point about the bias. Amazing how we lose sight of this PDSA, experimenting and being comfortable with getting it wrong and changing our theory. And I was just pondering that through as what you saw there. That was me. That was a thought coming into action.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's we talk about the 8 wastes, don't we? And the 8th waste that was added in was non-utilized talent. And why would we do that? We've hired people at great expense for their expertise.
Yeah.
So why would we not choose to take advantage of that expertise as part of our theory to building? Okay, and then finally on to people themselves. People are good people. You hear me say this an awful lot. My assumption is they're good people, and it's very rare that they prove me wrong. But doing the right thing requires an appreciation of the system. And next to nobody has the full picture, which makes this a team sport. It has to be a team sport. Because, even the CEO only understands the system from a very helicopter level. So although we can't run everything past the CEO, that would make no sense at all. So we need everybody to be part of the system, working together as a system. And that means using their natural good peopleness to help us to work out together what's the best thing. And I hear the buzzy bees in my ears. I hear this all the time. It's not, I'm not mindless to the challenges that the management teams are faced, particularly those in operations management, in the middle management, where there's just pressure from coming from all sides on them, and it just needs some of that noise to go away. And so I appreciate that me saying this, I say, oh, I haven't got time for this, I really haven't got time for this. But my argument is it's the opposite, is every time you're acting on the system without understanding it, what you're doing is increasing the noise. So don't just do something, stand there. You have got time for this, but you make time for it by concentrating on what the definition of the win is, and then making sure you've got a team built around it. It doesn't take very much longer, as you'll see later on in the presentation. Okay, so how to select with care? Well, the first criteria, critical success factor for you to consider, is you've got to have a straight line, a very clear line between the thinking about what you want to do and how it's going to advance the aim of your system. In creating value in terms of increased capability, increased dependability, improved margins, whatever it is you're looking to do, but make sure there is a straight line there. If you can't build that straight line, then you haven't got anything other than a knee-jerk reaction on your hands. Number two, we want to work on the system at the point of greatest leverage. And what we know, I'll talk a little bit later, I'll mention this again, value stream mapping is a good example of this. Value stream mapping is a good example of how we can see the end-to-end flow, and then from that we can see where bottlenecks are, is it the management system that's creating the bottlenecks, is it a capacity problem, is it a high defect rate, wastage, whatever it might be, where is the, because if you're working downstream of the bottleneck, you're not really going to have a major effect on the customer. If you're working upstream of the bottleneck, you'll have no effect on the customer, but you'll just make the customer, the bottleneck, feel even more frustrated and pressured. So understanding where you are and where's the best point for leverage, and if in doubt, work on the bottleneck. Tampering risk. We want to make sure that whatever it is we're planning to do, we're adjusting to the right type of variation. So if it's common cause variation, we're eliminating common causes and root causes, and if it's a assignable cause, we're either eliminating the risk of it happening again, or if it's something you can't eliminate, you're preparing those off-the-shelf processes for next time it happens. And that's the key thing. Very often managers rush around and treat all types of variations the same, and we end up with these hybrid processes that are both too complicated for the normal stuff and not complicated enough or not fast enough. Yeah, probably not fast enough to deal with the exceptions. And that's a really, really sad state of affairs, because it's the worst of both worlds. So we want to make sure that it's acting on the right type of variation. Then this one's fairly obvious. Probably I should have put it first with hindsight, Rich. Maybe I'll change it after the event, update the pack. But this is pretty good. Let's just all agree what a win means. What does that actually look like? You know, how often do we see it in team building and team management training? You know, the key success factor, one of the key success factors is everybody having an agreed definition of what they're trying to accomplish. And that's really important for us to achieve. And then we need to make sure, I've already mentioned a bit about the prediction, we need to set it up so that we've got that cycle working fast. The team needs to understand that they've got the management team's support. The management team is not just saying go and fix something, they're saying go and find lasting solutions to something. And that means you may have to take 2 or 3 or even 10, doesn't matter. But the point is you've got the management team will support you to find the solutions. And that's, think about the word quick again. We want to get to the lasting solution in the shortest possible time. Yeah, and that's example given by one of our listeners already. Unfortunately, there's now going to be a period of time before the learning is there. And hopefully, obviously, we'll be wrong and it works out. But if we're not, then how much time has been lost? We want to make sure that we're testing small, scaling fast. And then this is really key to me. My background is in psychology, some of you might know. And so ultimately, for me, it's about the people. And if we're trying to do something that's not healthy for people, you're not likely to get the team on board with the change. That's not being resistant. That's just looking after themselves. But also, if you drive people with incentives, they could be fear-based incentives or positive financial type incentive bonuses. What you're doing is distorting your system. You're increasing the noise. What we recommend instead is just, if something's really important, don't just dump it on people to do it. If something's important, help them through it. Be there with them on the journey. Lead the journey, to own the journey, and then feel the pain with people on the journey. Now, not everybody on this call, Rich, I'm aware, is in a management position, and I don't want to just talk to the managers because we've got many other people on it. So we could flip this on its head. So if, let's say, for example, I'm a green belt or a black belt in an organization, what does this mean for me? Well, what it means is when I'm chartering a project or you know, on a large scale or a smaller scale, it doesn't matter. But when I'm chartering a project, this can become a contract that we can have building into how we charter work. You know, have we established with the sponsor or the manager what exactly we're trying to accomplish and agreed that and got everybody on the same page over that? Have we got some data that allows us to show that we're acting on the best part of the system? Have we got an understanding that the team are going to be given the time to go through that plan, do, study, act loops necessary? Are they being empowered properly? We'll talk a bit more about governance very shortly. And these things here, these are things that anybody has the right to ask for. And of course, they might be told, no, just shut up and get on with it. But at least then you know that your task is to do the least waste along the way because you've tried to do the right thing, but it's not always possible. I am aware of that. Okay. So how do we help the management team to do this? Well, we need to help them to help themselves. And that's about aligning our improvements with the strategic outcome. We want clear aims, clear drivers, and anybody and everybody can contribute to this. I just want to show a little bit about what happens when we get our goals wrong and we try and manage the system by the tail wagging the dog. Some of you will already be familiar with Deming's funnel experiment, and again, some of you might be new. If you haven't seen it before, please do go and read up on it. It's in Out of the Crisis, it's in the New Economics, but it's a really brilliant way of demonstrating what happens if you don't just stand there, do something rather than what I'm advising. Okay, let's have a look. So the principle is this, is you get a funnel, putting it over a piece of paper, and you drop a marble onto it and somebody marks where the marble lands. But on the piece of paper, there is an X marks the spot target. And what the person marking is able to do is look to see how far away from the target it landed, and they mark it up. And there you go, there's an example. You can see that the marble was meant to aim right underneath it, but there's a spread of places where the marble has ended. And that's what you would call common cause variation. Just because of random variation factors that happen built into the process, the marble doesn't land in exactly the same place every time. Okay, so what happens if we want to try and improve this? Well, there are 3 rules that represent most of the ways that people usually try and tamper with the process. And by the way, tampering is the tail wagging the dog, trying to change the result by changing the target, changing the process on the basis of the target. So rule number 2 is you move the funnel to compensate. Oh, I was left a bit, so I'll aim a little bit right a bit next time, and so on. And it's a relatively small change. But what you can see happens here is the dots spread out. So although you're trying to adjust for the variation, the result of it is you get more variation. Let me give you some examples. What about a traditional machine setting? Oh, the machine's getting a bit hot, so I turn it down a little bit. Or it's getting a bit cool, I'll turn it up a bit. And then what's happening here is the process is not allowed to behave naturally, and therefore every time we adjust the process, we increase the variation. What about there's a rumor going round that some big deal is going to go down, or there's going to be a management reorganization or something like that? Look at the amount of noise and chaos just that one rumor, or there's going to be a reorg. Yeah, how much time would be lost to that almost immediately if that kicked off? Yeah, maybe we've all experienced that. Or then even between companies, we can cause it by one trying to compete with the other on price. And all it does is just disturbs the market and creates lots of noise in it. So these are sort of 3 very different level examples of rule 2. But it's still relatively not too damaging. All it's done is just made the variation worse. Rule 3, however, is a much more dangerous one, because what we're now trying to do is specifically compensate for the gap. We're not just making minor adjustments, we're now actually flipping right to the other side. Well, I was left on here, so I'm now going to go all the way to the other side of the target and aim there instead. And look what happens to the process. It starts spreading out in a line, and we get these swing effects. Let me give you some examples. Competing KPIs, a competition within the operations areas to reduce costs, while there's not competition from KPIs being set for sales to increase sales, and so you've got extra stuff coming in at the same time that operations are trying to underinvest in maintenance or something like that. And these two things compete with each other and set off all kinds of problems. A common problem for that, particularly for those of you involved in government, is where we use regulation to try and manage exceptions. And what that does is it creates this huge distortion in the processes as the processes try and expand to cope with exceptional situations. I've done quite a bit of work, for example, a long time in the past in social care and responding to tragic cases that you occasionally see in the news. But not every case is a tragic case. So belt and braces on the process. And then that means that there isn't enough time to support the small cases. So everybody has to then rush around and deal with the small cases as a separate job, and so on and so forth. And then, you know, just growing numbers of projects, or of course the old classic centralize, decentralize. This is the common one in organizations. What's the next organization design? The opposite of what we've got now and the one that we had before. And this is the swing from left to right.
And has it been 7 years since the last one?
And has it been 7 years? Yes. Rich, I also use the 7 years thing. It's a really useful data point, that, isn't it? On average, it takes 7 years between more major management reorganizations, which means you're halfway through one before you're starting to plan the next, which is quite fun, but obviously very, very disruptive and wasteful. And finally, the other one, which is the drifting one, is where wherever the ball lands becomes the new target. And why would you do that in a process? Because what happens over time is it just drifts further and further and further away from what's needed. But what about budget setting? Oh, what's the budget? Well, the same as last year plus inflation, or cascade learning. Well, if I train you and you train somebody else and they train somebody else and they train somebody else, by the time you check in between the first and the last, is there anything left of the original knowledge? Usually the answer to that is next to no. So all of these examples hopefully illustrate to you small variation built in, large variation built in, but still common cause, wider and wider exceptions, everything becomes an exception further and further away. So there is one best outcome. Leave the damn funnel alone. Don't just do something, stand there. And then you can spend the time, instead of responding to the crisis you've created, you can spend the time nailing what's causing that internal variation and improve the process. So these are the things to take into mind. So how do we do this? We start by agreeing the aim, make sure that any change we understand how it links to what we're trying to accomplish, part of our 3-question model. Then we look to see, are we working on the main drivers, the thing that's going to have the best leverage? That maybe requires a little bit of data. And then from that, we can get into our toolbox. And there's an incredible range of tools. I shall mention just a few. The 7 planning and management tools, of which I want to particularly focus on affinity diagram and interrelationship diagram. 9 out of 10, maybe even more than 9 out of 10 of the problems I solve, those 2 alone are enough for me to identify the key leverage points in a system. And if you're not familiar with them, we've got some advice and recommendations coming up and so forth, but we've got lots and lots of material on our website. You will be able to find support and advice around those. If, however, you get one of those rare situations where it's more complex, particularly those of you working in very complex organizations, system mapping, and a good introductory text to system mapping is Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, from the 1990s. And from the back of that work that was done back then, most of the main archetypes about typical ways that human behave are now mapped and are already pre-done for you. So look up system archetypes, and once you've learned how to read them, they're incredibly useful. Particularly for those of in the improvement cycle, the simplest system archetype is the break-fix cycle, and that one's really relevant for us. And then if you want to go into the innovation space, two tools that I found extraordinarily useful, trained to me by Daryl Mann, around this problem explorer, particularly working on sort of more engineering and technical type problems, and perception mapping when I'm working more people and process and social type problem areas. And all of these have one purpose, doesn't matter which tools you're using, it's to change the ideas. If you want better results tomorrow than you're getting today, you need better ideas today than you had yesterday. That's or simpler way of putting it, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So let's change some ideas by having better understanding of how we can get leverage on the system. I mentioned governance earlier. None of this will work effectively if we don't get the right leadership support. So what do we need up front from our leadership team? We need the aim, as we've already discussed, and we need clear boundaries. And within those boundaries, what are our decision rights? If you expect somebody to go and improve the system, you need to give them the authority to improve the system. Time and time again, I see well-meaning improvements practitioners setting off to run a project without having agreed up front that they have the authority to act on the system. It's a really, really key, important conversation for you to have before you form your team, because you need that authority to act on the system if you're going to be able to embed the changes. And then on the other side, what are we looking for? We're looking for the leadership team to provide you with that cadence. How often are we going to meet? How often are we going to review? You know, if it's a genuine urgent problem, that learning cadence better be fast, daily even. But if it's a relatively small problem or a very complex one that requires many teams across maybe even multiple organizations, then a slower cadence, because you need to have time to make progress. Signal-based decisions, let the data do the talking, not the gut instinct. Doesn't mean the gut instinct is wrong, but we need evidence. We need evidence that it's right. And as I've mentioned before, we need to make it so that it's safe for people to work. Those involved in leading the change need to be supported so that they don't become victims. And I'm particular shout out to those of you on the call who are amongst that wonderful group of people, the ones the management team always rely on to fix stuff.
Yes.
Because I know you are amazing people doing fantastic work, but there's only so much you can do. And what we want to do is get to a situation where everybody's able to succeed and contribute to improvement, not just the favoured few or the put upon few. It's important to look after our best people at the same time of making things easier for our average people. It's a key point. So moving on, we're coming towards the end of this. How to apply some practical tools for pace and focus. Well, my question to you is, by what method? By what method will you make change happen? And the answer is, it depends on the problem. Of course it does. But what you want is that shortest lead time from the start of the situation to the sustainable solution. More of the benefit, less of the harm. And I've stolen from Art Smalley. If any of you are familiar with A3 thinking or the process of creating level flow across the system, Art Smalley is one of the lead authors in that area. And I've stolen this shamelessly from him and the work of the Lean Enterprise Academy. It's a brilliant tool, and I'll just talk you through some key points first of all. First of all, there's two types of problems ultimately. The ones that are caused by the situation on the ground, and then those that you are creating for yourself by looking to improve. So one is reactive, one is created and proactive. And then you've got the situation down the side is who needs to lead it. Everybody needs to be involved in reacting to problems that are easy to fix. You know, if you can see the root cause is right in front of you, then get on and fix it. Why wouldn't you? Fix it now. Yeah, we want to just do it. But as soon as something's not got an immediate access to root cause, the definition of quick is still the same. The definition of how to go quickly changes. And all of the remaining three are based on scientific data and facts. Because anything other than when the root cause is immediately obvious, if you're not using data and facts, you're just guessing, then you're maximizing your time to find a solution because you're hoping that your idea is the best one and you've got no way of knowing. So the quickest way is to do it properly. 4 C's at the team manager level, the team member level is usually sufficient, usually responds to reactive stuff and small scale improvement work. But by the time we're getting a little bit more cross-functional, but still practical, tools like 8Ds and Kaizen events are extremely well suited. And by the time we're up into the really tough stuff or the innovation space, then we're going to need full improvement cycles, green belt, black belt, design for Lean Six Sigma, TRIZ type methodologies. So you can see the level of expertise required goes up as the difficulty and the time required gets worse. And we should match our methodology to the nature of the problem. The quick is driven by the quality of your application of the method, not by the next Tuesday. How well you apply the method, it was what matters. So that's the key thing there. So how do we do this? First of all, agree our operational definitions. What is it the definition of success? What is it the definition of what we're going to change? And then how are we going to do that? Go and see the real life. We'll go and see the situation. And we can use tools like statistical process control, histograms, Pareto charts, scatter diagrams, as well as our own eyeballs to see what is going on in a process. Why wouldn't we use them? Target where to lever through value stream mapping, system mapping, and the tools that I mentioned, amongst others. And then lead, make sure that every one of you is working to actively use the governance and review cycles. If you're a manager and sponsoring, then leading it. And then if you're an improvement specialist practitioner, actively contributing to the data and the management of risk and so forth. And I'll just, Neil, hopefully you'll be putting these in the charts, but they're also here in the presentation. You can go to our resource hub, our knowledge hub, and here are some example pieces of content that you can draw on to explore on any one of these in more detail if they're not yet familiar to you.
And folks, all of these links and all the references to all of the publications that Sean's made throughout today's session will be included in the follow-up email. So you don't need to make a note of these just now. They'll all come to you in that email that will come out next week.
Super. And it's lovely to be able to draw on such rich material in support of this. It's just fantastic. Okay, very quickly, I'm aware of the time. AI is making things faster. It might be making things better, but that depends on how we use it. I'm not going to repeat Rich's point of the earlier point, but it's a very well made point. We need to learn how to use AI as a friend. We can use AI to help us detect signals in the system at scale, because we can suddenly start spotting a lot more information. But bear in mind, we should use that not to run around faster, but make better and better decisions about where the leverage points are going to be. We can use AI to help check our predictions. How, are our predictions rational or not? And it's something I've been practicing myself. Tell me what's wrong with my logic when I'm discussing solution ideas. And it's great at doing that as long as you tell it to be really critical. And experimentation, come up with ideas about how we might fix and so forth. So lots we can do to fast track improvement. It can give us insight into the flow. We can build our agents to map and track our value stream maps and so forth, and understand bottlenecks and identify if the bottlenecks shifting and so on. And lots of data mining potential there as well for any of you involved in that kind of area. AI can help us improve the quality of our data. It can improve the operational definitions. Is there any data that's not clear? Is it not being used properly? Is it not making sense? That data layer, improving and cleaning up our data in our systems. So our data lake is somewhere we want to swim in rather than a rather murky place with lots of algae around the edge of it. Brilliant. And then finally, it can help us to capture knowledge, because we can build that internal knowledge base and then make it available. We can do some process improvement, capturing the knowledge, and then have that available for people to research when they're doing their own improvement activities. So there's loads of cool stuff that we can do to use AI to make this go faster, but it still needs to be driven against the core principles of the main aim.
Okay,
So
Sean, just before you do
yeah,
your
sure.
summary slides, folks, we are going to do PMI Live Extra Slice, which involves 10 minutes at the end. Sean's going to finish the presentation now. Then we're going to address a couple of questions that have been asked throughout the sessions, and also revisit a couple of these practical items. So 10 minutes starting at 3 o'clock. We will record at 4 o'clock. We will record that. So if you can't stay on, you can get it in the recording. But please do stay with us if you'd like to. Sean, sorry. Carry on.
No, thanks, Rich. It's exciting to hear the comments and questions are coming in. So thank you very much. Yes, I will summarize the slides right here. If I can get my mouse to behave. Right, the priority for a quick win is for it to be a win. It should be obvious, but sadly we saw our 90-10. That's not. The quick is about taking the most efficient path. Back to my Art Smalley slide. Selecting your priorities requires an appreciation of the system, not just the thing that's causing you a hole in your foot. And there are methods that are tested, learnable, repeatable, but they do need to be mastered. And try and avoid initiative overload. It's far better to do one project that wins than 10 projects that deliver nothing but waste and pain. Effective governance is the key difference between win and lose. And it's the key difference between fast and slow. So the leadership team are as responsible as the improvement team in this regard. And finally, AI can help, but you do need to learn how to get it to work hard, not just tell you what a great question you asked. And on that, I shall pass back to you, Rich.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Sean. I'd like to jump to the next slide. We have the Goals to Results conference. Was a great success last year. It's coming up on the 17th of March 2026 at Warwick University in the Midlands in the UK. You can find out the details. It's open for booking. The full agenda is published, including keynote speakers, panel sessions, etc. 9 interactive workshops available within the session. Find out the details at pmi.co.uk/GUR G2R, or use the QR code just there. And if you could hop forward for me, Sean.
Of course.
Thank you very much. We've already mentioned the Knowledge Hub. All the content can be found in there. And finally, we have the PMI Live for next month. November is struggling to drive change, how to influence without executive authority. Key topic that has been requested over and over again by our audiences. So we're covering that, of course, on the last Friday of the month. At 1500 hours UK time. Register on the website. Okay, so those of you who've got to leave us now, thank you so much for joining us. Been our pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for your interactivity. Okay, Sean, if you'd like to stop sharing, let's go into Extra Slice and pick up some of these questions then. So straight out the blocks for you, Sean. Keep you on your toes. A real practical one here. Should a manager, so when thinking about the topics of quick wins, should the team generate those ideas and bring the management team on board, or should it be the other way around?
I'm going to be a typical consultant here and say both. And
but I'm going to depends. I thought it depends was coming there, Sean, for a minute.
Okay, it depends. Well, I'm going to say both. I'm going to be both. So not a slightly atypical consultant. And what do I mean? But what does it depend on, Rich? And it depends on, are we talking about top-down system change? So how do the senior managers set priorities and direction for the future? And that ideally will be cascaded down through a strategy deployment process, through the value streams, through the value stream owners, the system owners within that, through the process owners. And therefore these system owners and process owners need to be keeping a backlog of genuinely evidenced changes that are required, either because it's come up from the bottom, from the front line, as problems that can't be solved at the front line, or because it's in line with the future direction of the company. We're trying to open up a new site or change suppliers or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. So that's the top-down piece, and that's actually critical because that's making sure our processes stay future ready. And if you don't yet have value stream owners and system owners and process owners in your organization, that's something for us, we can talk about how to get that set up. But but very often businesses are stuck in silo mode. They can't get that to work because nobody's responsible for the end-to-end. So you kind of need to fix those two things side by side.
Yeah, and I think
Therefore,
I'd add
mm,
for that to that whole theme in both those
yeah,
circumstances you just described there is what's the key theme here? It's got to be data, hasn't it?
yeah,
What's the evidence? What's the data in order to help make these decisions, whichever way they come from, more reliable? So gut feeling is enough to follow your nose to get the data, but
yes,
it's not enough in isolation.
yeah, absolutely, Rich. And building on that, where does the data come from? It comes from the
Aha.
front line. It comes from Gemba.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and if any of you done the red bead experiment, you'll know all about the only people who could see the red beads are the people managing and dealing with the red beads. You can't improve the system without actually improving the way the work works.
Yep.
And the only people who are doing that are the process operators on the front line, supported by their process managers, the supervisors and frontline team leaders and so forth. So of course, that group should be working to identify their own quick wins. That's box one of the chart I showed from Art Smalley. And then they need to have a mechanism for escalating at a whole team level what they can fix as a team, and then have a mechanism for escalating what needs to be fixed as part of the wider system. And it might be an end-to-end value chain, it might be plant-wide, whatever it might be. But it really doesn't matter where it comes from ultimately. The important thing is everybody needs to recognize that they're either contributing to improvement or keeping their head buried in the sand. There's nothing in between.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Sean. Right, bounding on then. So thinking about your governance slides, within there you had aims and boundaries, decision rights, learning cadence, signal-based decisions, psychology, and safety. Question then, so should we also include that leaders create and align a communication strategy to make sure that stakeholders are updated within thinking about the context of that model? So whose
Wow.
responsibility is that, and how helpful is it?
Yes, indeed. Well, starting with the basics, how often do we hear the issue that the problem with the project was there wasn't enough communication? And then you try and operationally define what enough is, and it's always more than you did.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, the communication strategy is critical. But what we need to see is communication is data. And the question we've got to be clear about is who needs what data, when do they need it, and in what format do they need it?
Mhm.
And one of the issues that I see in terms of quick wins is, and it's a genuine problem that frustrates me quite a large deal, is often what people are looking to do is communicate the good news before people have properly even understood the bad news. So we're going to implement this wonderful new change before people have even understood there was a need for change.
Mhm.
And I'm a big fan of a writer called Peter Scott Morgan, and he taught me the importance of, first of all, people need to understand why change. And
Mhm.
that's what we should communicate first. And everybody involved in the change, but especially those who are commissioning it, should be very, very clear with people why change first. And then after that, why this change? But we don't know why this change until we've got to the bottom part of the improvement cycle where we've got tested solutions. And there's
Mhm.
your data point again, Rich. We can say why this changed because we tried others and this was the best. And then we can move on to how to change, and then we communicate the how to change. So there's different communications at different stages of the improvement cycle. And too often people are wanting to communicate wonderful news long before we're ready to justify it.
Well, indeed, and that really struck me with right up front when you were talking about what goes wrong with quick wins, Sean. And let me just copy that into the chat so people can see what I'm talking about. That image that I've just pasted in there. Yeah, the second point on that list: overreacting to noise makes performance worse. It's exactly what you've just described there, isn't it?
Mhm.
But how aware are we when we're not? Because we confuse action with improvement,
Yes.
and the fear of not acting is profound, and it's a human instinct. So it's not, all of this stuff that Sean's been describing. At no point are we saying that it's easy. But back
Mm.
to that quote that from Henry Neve, best efforts without method equals trouble. Boy, oh boy, have I used that to great effect throughout my career when I've been mindful of it and thought about it. Fight the instinct. The instinct can be helpful to get the direction, but best efforts without method, without fail, equals trouble.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay, so one final question then, Sean. Regarding quick win definition, what level of harm is okay and what is too much? And how do you evaluate before it's too late?
Oh, wow, 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 wow.
There's a punchy one to end
Yeah,
on.
yeah, no, thank you for the question. I like it when people ask things that I'm going to have to actually really think hard about, because what level of harm is okay? Because the obvious instinctive answer is, well, we don't want any harm, but that's not answering the question. Because the definition of innovation is more of the benefit and none of the harm, in a way that's commercially, in the case of a commercial environment, achievable. So so yes, what level of harm is okay? I guess a relatively crude answer, but a starting answer would be where the additional benefit from the new design is greater than the additional harm of the new design. But I still don't like that answer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to answer as a practitioner here. And that is, what level of harm would I accept into a solution that I went live? And that is less than we currently have. Otherwise, I've just not thought hard enough yet.
Yeah, okay. So let's try this then. So what I would add to that is question 2 of our 3-question model. How we know a change is improvement.
Yeah. ...
or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how about pondering those before you embark it? That'd be a useful tool in there too, wouldn't it? To answer that harm question. What's the benefit we're looking like, and how will we know? And what harm and how will we know? Interesting one.
Yes, and I think I'll just give a really big example from the last 30 years that if that question had been asked properly, would have totally transformed an awful lot of pain right across the world. And that is when there was the big rush for outsourcing. Because people looked at the benefits in terms of very micro unit costs. Of course they did. That was the easy thing to do. But they didn't look at what's the harm of the outsourcing. Which often either exceeded or far exceeded the benefit of the outsource. I'm not saying there weren't exceptions,
of course.
But overall, the harm question was never asked.
Yeah, indeed. Fantastic. Thanks, Sean. Thanks again for everyone that's participated. That brings us to the end of Extra Slice with our 10 minutes. So let's take this one thing away there. Can't resist this. The why before the what. Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for being with us.